Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's Brave Cat here once again with another Frontier Signals update. So I'm just going to roll right into it here. We've had quite a bit of instability in the magnetic field, and especially when we see, if I can kind of zoom in on it a little bit here, we can see this very abrupt spike in the solar wind here. And I mean, this pretty much caught everybody off guard. You know, I sure as hell didn't see it coming. So nobody predicted this, and it was very just kind of out of nowhere. So it made us spike all the way up into KP7, and overall we've just had a lot of random activity here. So none of it is really going into the X-class range, and yet the magnetic field is just being absolutely bombarded right now with all these little events going on. I mean, you can just see how many, smaller spikes there are here. And we can take a look at what the sun looks like. So we can take a look at this one here in 171 angstroms first off. So, and this goes off, the last few days here, so we can even see all the way back to where the M3 flare happened up here and everything that's happened since then. I'm not sure if oh, there it is. So then you can just see just kind of everywhere, especially in this kind of central region, just all sorts of little flares popping off here and there. And the strangest thing to me, actually, is when we go over here to the NOAA, and we take a look at I believe this is the X-ray absorption, basically. So, whenever we get a solar flash, it'll pop up here. And we can just see, like, on the north and the south pole is just getting absolutely hammered all the way through. So, we haven't had any major X-class flares. We've just had repeated smaller events. And all right, let me get. So I'm not exactly sure why this is showing so much red going on here. I mean, it's pretty much acting as if we've had back-to-back X flares hit us or something, when clearly that's not the case. So, I mean, that really leads me to believe that the magnetic field has weakened even further than what most people are willing to admit. That's why I subscribe to a lot of Ben Davidson's science regarding all these things, that the magnetic field is much lower than some of the mainstream sources will admit, potentially even close to down by, almost 50%, which, would kind of make these things a little bit more clear. We've had the proton flux kind of riding almost into level 2 here. And, we were supposed to have these very kind of selective, deliberate coronal mass ejections hit us where, that hasn't happened. All right, the first one that happened from the X1.5 was delayed by over 24 hours. And then even before this most recent flare has hit us, now we've seen the KP index shoot up and all these different instabilities happening. So let's go back here and let's look more at this. So take a look at the 335 angstroms. We can get another view of what's been going on. So this one kind of shows the bright active regions a little bit better. There was the M-class flare, which was still pretty big for an M-class rare. That's quite a huge region of the sun to flare off like that. And then we can just see all these other little things dotted around here flaring off. We got this region going off. And a lot of these other regions look a little bit unstable, especially this one that is now directly facing us. So just go down here. We can take a look at the magnetogram. So right now, pretty much the last, or one of the last major sunspot groups to be facing us right now. So we don't got anything else coming here on the left side. But this one right here is front and center. So this one does look pretty magnetically complex here. We've got these opposing polarities right next to each other, kind of scrunched up. So this one looks to be ready to go off next, perhaps. And, that wouldn't be too good for the magnetic field. I mean, we'll sure get, some pretty good auroras here. We've got the forecast models here, which, we can always look on here as well. I do want to try to get some more, kind of advanced models on here, but I haven't haven't really looked too much into how to get the NOAA things on here. Pretty much everything I have over here is from SDO, which is why when, that goes down, it kind of sucks. But we can see here we have a couple of periods where, especially right here, where the auroras are going to be pretty big. So that'll be, I guess, pretty much right about now, it actually is when this is happening on the other side of the world. And then when it comes to face us, well, I'm not exactly sure about that. But yeah, especially this is what really has me like kind of scratching my head. So, so that's what we got going on pretty much space weather wise. You can see the magnometer has just been jumping all over the place. And especially these things, definitely some pretty abrupt behavior going on there. So when we take a look at the earthquakes, this is going to kind of almost seem to mimic that activity where, things look kind of unstable, a little bit out of hand. And especially with these various swarms and clusters going on, it seems pretty likely that we're going to see some more big earthquake events happening, most likely on the other side of the Pacific. So kind of watching out for the West Coast a little bit, as well as this region in the Virgin Island kind of area where this just has been ongoing. And we just take it back a few days and this stack pretty much reaches the sky. Same thing over here in Europe. So over here by Greece, we still see sustained tremor activity, well, going up into the 3 and 4 range. So, pretty substantial over here by Greece. So, yeah, especially following the events that happened over here on the other side of the Pacific. So, this here has gone from being aftershocks to now it's just a total cluster. I had this all nice and ready, but I guess I got to refresh that. Hopefully get that up and running here. So when we zoom in on this spot where the 7.4 struck, which was originally a 7.8, we can see this whole area here. So this is just a full-on cluster of earthquakes happening at this point. A lot of these in the 5 range or upper 4. So this is definitely pretty significant. This whole part of the plate is just kind of breaking pretty much. And, not only does that mean potential activity in this region, but that is going to most likely affect surrounding regions. So we already have an uptick in Hawaii, an uptick in the tremor activity that we see here. We've had continued slow slip events over on the Pacific Northwest tremor map here. So again, this is just more consistency here. We take it back for the whole month, where before this, there was almost nothing really happening for weeks to months on end. And now we are coming back into a period where there is just ongoing seismic unrest and just overall a lot of movement in the whole plate. So, I think this is going to be the time to watch for these things, especially just as this year progresses. I don't think this is going to be any kind of quick time event. I think this is going to be kind of a drawn out process, kind of like what we saw over here where we had multiple large deep events, nothing really tremendously happening until now. So I think we could see these tremor swarms just ongoing for a while before something builds up, and hopefully we'll have, adequate warning and, different events happening that'll hopefully kind of spell it out, because, when we're talking about the West Coast and some of these other areas, we really don't want anything to just jump out and surprise anyone, but, there's not that many people that actually seem to care about this stuff. So, at this point, it's like people that are aware of it already know the risks, already know the signs, and anybody who doesn't, well, it's just kind of is what it is, I suppose. But yeah, I think even just in the next couple days to couple weeks, we could definitely see some bigger earthquakes striking overall just in this whole area, as well as back over here in Europe. So, paying attention to Italy, which has been pretty quiet for the last couple weeks. But then we have the Mediterranean area that has just had sustained movements going on. So that's really what to watch out for. We had, this Afghanistan area, so you can see all the arrows, which just align with major plate boundaries. Right here, where the letter D is, this is where all these plates kind of converge. So it's pretty common to see activity going on here. So we could see some larger activity there, over in Europe, over here by the Virgin Islands, which kind of extends down to South America where all these volcanoes are. We have these complicated bends in the plate where pressure can build up for a while before something big happens, and that travels back up here to the west coast, and everything that is going on in the whole Pacific. So, all these things are just really, closely related to each other. And, before I forget, one other main thing happening right now is the Comet MAPS is making its closest perihelion approach. So we're going to see, who's right. Is it going to be a sun grazer or is it going to be a sun diver? And I'm kind of leaning towards the idea that this is just going to go straight into the sun and we're not going to see it come out the other side, but, we'll see what happens. So, you can see it right here. I don't know if zooming in is going to do anything. Yeah, so you can see it right here. At this point, it's, I don't know, probably about 12 hours away from actually making its closest approach. So, this is pretty much going to happen overnight, and we'll see what happens to that on the other side. But it's pretty spectacular seeing it on here on the chronograph. So definitely did not want to leave that out because that's like one of the major things that's happening right now. So, with that pretty much wraps it up. We still had ongoing ash plumes in these various volcanoes here. But, we haven't had anything bigger than what we saw coming out of Sheveluk, Kamchatka with the 48,000 foot high blast. So now it is down to 25,000 feet. And going over here on X, there's been a lot of reports of some pretty major sandstorm events. So, there's a couple other posts that I found that I didn't make it in here, but, where you just see this glowing orange, or even in some cases, like blood red, sky happening in some of these areas. And this is a pretty big dust storm here. So this is over in Pakistan, and this is up in Turkey, so pretty large area. I'm just going to bring up this map because it's right here. So, we're looking at Turkey and pretty much the whole Middle East, kind of different sections of that, experiencing these various Dust Bowl events. So, yeah, I would not want to be caught up in that. Looks pretty bad. That's like some, Great Depression kind of levels of Dust Bowl happening over there. Pretty intense. But I think that is going to wrap it up for today's update. I'll try to find some more resources like always. So there's something that I really, really want to track involving earthquakes, which is looking at things electromagnetically. So trying to find different pre-seismic signals happening in regards to those mechanics. Because, just looking at the earthquake activity by itself isn't really enough. And even just looking at and comparing that to the solar activity also just isn't enough. Because again, these tectonic plates can be very unpredictable. They can build up stress over a long period of time before breaking. They can do things that ordinarily might seem random, but when you have enough data collected in one place, you can pretty much, or at least theoretically, predict these things and see it happening in real time. So anyways, that'll do it. So hope y'all enjoyed, got something out of it. Please like and subscribe for more. Share this video if you dare, and as always, I'll catch you all in the next.